think for me, the biggest surprise, the thing that really hit home most powerfully, was this link between rocks and politics. How there can be this long chain of cause and effect between the rocks and who we choose to vote for in elections. My name's Lewis Dartnell. I am a professor at the University of Westminster in London. What's becoming clearer and clearer over recent years is the incredible impact that we as a species, that humanity is having on our planet in terms of the gases we're releasing into the atmosphere, the rocks we're mining from underground, how we're changing the rivers and the land and the oceans. And this particular chapter in Earth's history has been called the Anthropocene, the human-created era. But what I wanted to do for this new book, for Origins, was to look at the flip side of the coin, to look at how we got here. How is it that throughout our entire history as a species, it's been nature that's had this dominant influence over humanity, and only very recently have, as our species, have humans, seized control, if you like, over the planet, but not in a particularly responsible or controlled way so far. From our very origin as a species, we've been influenced and affected by fundamental forces on our planet, even down to how we evolved in East Africa. So that region is our cradle as a species. And there's something very particular, very special about that part of the world, where you have a lot of tectonic activity. The Great Rift Valley is being torn open as the crust, the skin of the planet itself tears apart. And that's interacting with climatic effects, and particularly cycles in the climate that are being influenced by Earth's orbit around the sun, or the wobble of the planet on its axis. And those influences interacted to create periods of great chaos, great unpredictability in the climate in East Africa where we're living. And so the solution that we evolved was intelligence. We evolved our big brains to be able to outthink this chaotic climatic environment around us. So in this sense, as a species, we are children of plate tectonics. We evolved as a species in East Africa, but obviously we didn't stay, we didn't remain in our cradle, and we've since come to disperse and migrate around the entire planet. And it was a different chapter in Earth's climactic history that enabled us to do that. It was the last great ice age of planet Earth. And with these huge ice sheets, some up to 4 kilometers thick over the northern hemisphere, they drew so much water out of the oceans that the sea levels around the world dropped by about 100, maybe 120 meters. And so this exposed huge areas of the seafloor to become dry land. And our ancestors were simply able to walk between the continents. And in particular, our species of humanity, Homo sapiens, was the only species to have reached the Americas. So it was the Great Ice Age that enabled this huge, grand dispersal of our species around the planet. After we'd dispersed around the world and this last Great Ice Age had thawed and the planet warmed up again and the sea levels rose, our response to this shift in the climate was to invent agriculture. Around the world, independently, in different spots, people settled down and started to domesticate wild plants to become crops and wild animals to become our livestock. And in particular places around the planet, we see this deep connection between where the earliest civilizations, fed by agriculture, grew up. Again, it was geological forces, planetary forces, that gave us places where agriculture was easier to get started. It gifted us abundant food and a growing human population, and so we started settling down into larger and larger cities, and so civilization itself was born. And it's not just been the movement of the earth beneath our feet, of plate tectonics and continental movements, but also the swirling of the atmosphere high above our head has had a huge influence over centuries of human history. And in particular, where we find the major wind bands around the planet, the trade winds, the westerly band of winds, because these are fundamentally dictated by how the Earth's atmosphere circulates above the surface, and that dictated where the major trade routes became established. It dictated the entire pattern of European exploration in the Age of Sail, of colonization, of empire building. And so still today, we see the fingerprint of these patterns of atmospheric circulation in the shape of the world today, in where major cities became founded, for example. We're just as influenced by these deep planetary features living today in our modern world of intercontinental air flights and glittering cities of steel and glass. And features of the planet undermine everything we see in current affairs, and even helps determine politics and who people vote for in elections. And a really nice example of this is the voting patterns in the southern states of the US. Now, the southern states are mostly a Republican area. It's mostly a sea of red when you look at the political map. But there's this very distinct crescent of blue Democrat voting counties arcing right across the southern states, which doesn't relate to any river, any mountain chain, and any course of hills. And in fact, it maps right on top of a band of rocks just underground. They're about 75 million years old. Rocks that were laid down when North America was flooded by ocean, when the sea levels were much, much higher. And so the rocks there, when they break down and eroded, give you a soil which is incredibly fertile, because it's basically seafloor mud. And so in the second half of the 19th century, in the late 1800s, it was realised that soil in that region is very thick and black and fertile, and is wonderfully productive for growing cash crops like cotton. And unfortunately, in that period of history, that involved slave labour. People were abducted from Africa, thrown into chains, taken across the Atlantic on the band of winds of the trade winds, and forced to work on cotton plantations focused along that particular band of rocks. And even today, even hundreds of years after the abolition of slavery, after the Civil War, after the Civil Rights Movement, the greatest concentration of black African American people live along that band of 70-million-year-old rocks. It's not a direct consequence of people choosing to vote Democrat from that particular demographic, but there is this long chain of cause and effect from socio-economic causes down to soil type and agriculture, to the rocks, to the geology, and then back through millions of years of our planet's history.